I always knew that I didn't have a bipolar thing, that I wasn't crazy, that I was sick, something was wrong with me. I always felt that in my heart very, very strongly. And that's why, they tried to say that I was trying to like have something wrong with me because I knew for a long time that I would get sick like this. I didn't plan this out. What really, really pisses me off is when these people have the gall to think that I planned this out. Have you ever considered that some people just might be really intuitive? Like, I'm intuitive. I knew that something wasn't right with me. I always knew that. I knew that about the autism piece of this, and I knew that about the physical, the Ehlers-Danlos piece of this. I always knew that I was like more fragile than other people, that my skin, I always looked at my skin and thought, wow, it's like so soft. And, my body is so soft. Like, this is not normal. And then with my brain, I thought I'm weird. I thought I'm, different. I knew I was different. So physically, I knew I was different physically and mentally. So eventually I kind of tried to accept their stupid labels and just say, oh yeah, I need to guess I could like try to get help and whatever. And some of the cognitive work that I did was helpful because I had trauma and it helped me. And especially the stuff with addictions recovery work because I don't, I'm not, I don't drink anymore. I'm a non-drinker today, but I had issues with alcohol big time at some points. Recovery, like AA, to be honest, like recovery groups were helpful for self-regulating because you would get into cycles where your body's deregulated, so your mind, you're cognitively distorted in your mind, and then it's a vicious cycle. And then unfortunately the medicals are easily able to point the finger at you and say that you're crazy because the thing is that you're being psychiatrically and psychologically affected by your condition. Psychiatrically meaning chemically, your neurology is affected, your neurology is imbalanced if you have dysautonomia. So it's gonna can present like a mood disorder and for a lot of people, and this completely frames them. It's really frustrating because that's how I was framed for a long time. What I don't understand about these medicals though is that, like, don't you get that when people have a mental health issue, it might actually mean that there's a physical illness? Like, have you ever thought that these things aren't completely separate? Like, it's amazing how much they separate them. You know, like they can say like reactive depression. People have get reactive depression to being sick. It's hard being sick. You're limited, you're in pain all the time. Yeah, you're going to get depressed. So but if they don't think that also, even if they do appear to have a mental health problem, even if it appears like a bipolar or a severe depression, the chemical nature of it, like the actual psychiatry part of it, could be as a side effect of what's going on physically. If it's going to affect the brain in terms of causing like, attacks on the brain, it's can affect the moods. It can, I don't understand why the doctors don't connect them more often and treat them like they're separate things, and even use the psychiatric or psychological presentation of somebody to victim blame them, and that person somehow doesn't require medical investigation because they have a mental health issue. I mean, that's ridiculous to me. Like, they blame the person's physical illness on the mental health issue instead of, considering that the physical illness is causing the mental health issue. So I don't know why. I think it's purely cognitive dissonance, which means, they're refusing to look at it. They're stubborn, because they really don't want to have to address these problems. That's the thing. So any reason they will have to not address them, they tend to go for that. I mean, that can't work forever because people are starting to come out and say this, that they ended up getting sick. They can only blame physical illness on mental health to a certain point. When the person starts developing gastroparesis so bad that they can't have any food in their stomach and they're vomiting it up, when the person is starting to like tremble and like mini stroke out, with like what happens with EDS, you cannot at that point continue when they have major flare-ups, someone has an autoimmune disorder like rashes. Like, if the condition gets worse, they can't keep on blaming a mental health issue when it's very clear that the person is physically ill, because that at that point that would be blatant patient neglect and blatant patient abuse. So, I mean, but what I think is really sad is that once people start getting ill, very ill, and they're believed, they're badly damaged, traumatized. We are, and that has made us sicker. So in the fight to try and get believed, we get sicker. If they would rewire the way that they did medicine to prescribe medicine in order to prevent, so that they'd say, oh, you have this condition, it's not that bad right now, we're going to give you this, we're going to prevent it from getting to this unbearable state here so that you can keep your job and keep your life and blah blah blah. If they had medicine that would do that, that would be amazing, and then they would be able to flag people before people get very sick and have to start being super life limited, right? But because they don't have that, they go and blame psych. They use psych to, victim blame people so that they don't need to help them until the person is sick and completely dependent on the medication. But what I think is really stupid about that is that you can still give a person a medication and they can still be dependent lifelong, or be like a returning customer. This is just from their point of view, right? Playing the devil's advocate. And you can still do that when they're in the when they're in a preventative stage. I don't think they need to drag people on like this. Victim blame them until they're so sick that it's like obvious. It's a pattern that the medical profession keeps repeating, and it's like, it's got to stop. We have to have new ways, because this is a psychologically injurious way for people. It causes trauma. And it causes worse illness because of that. I mean, you don't need to abuse patients, beat them down until they come crawling to you. It doesn't. I don't think it needs to be that way. I think there could be another way to do things.